One Piece looks like a goofy pirate adventure, but 2025 reminded us how brutally dark this series can get. Behind the laughs, colorful powers, and ridiculous characters is a story about slavery, torture, political oppression, genocide, and children forced to suffer because of the sins of adults. And somehow, Oda makes all of it hit harder than most supposedly dark anime. In 2025, the One Piece anime continued through the Egghead Arc, bringing the Straw Hats deeper into a conflict involving Vegapunk, the world government, the Five Elders, and the mysterious history of the world. At first glance, Egghead looks like a futuristic playground, but underneath the technology is something much darker. The world government desperately wants certain truths erased. And that's where One Piece starts feeling less like a simple shonen adventure and more like a dystopian nightmare. The most brutal part of the 2025 story is arguably Bartholomew Kuma's past. Kuma isn't simply a powerful character. His life is basically a chain of tragedies. He suffers slavery, persecution, the loss of loved ones, and eventually becomes a weapon controlled by the world government. The anime doesn't just tell us Kuma suffered, it makes us sit with it. His story with Bonnie is especially cruel because Kuma repeatedly sacrifices himself so his daughter can survive. The world government exploits that love, turning a father's desperation into a weapon against him. And this is where One Piece becomes genuinely disturbing. The series shows how powerful institutions can destroy ordinary people while pretending their actions are necessary for order. That theme isn't new in One Piece, but Egghead makes it painfully personal. The world government isn't simply fighting pirates. It controls information, suppresses history, and eliminates people who become threats to its version of the world. Even characters like Vegapunk become targets simply because they know too much. That's what makes the violence feel different. It's not violence for the sake of gore. It's violence connected to power, fear, and control. And yes, the anime can get bloody. There are sword fights, gunfire, explosions, supernatural attacks, injuries, and stylized blood. Official classification for 2025's Egghead episodes specifically noted animated violence and injury detail. Some episodes have even received 14+ content advisories for violence, smoking, drug or alcohol use, and profanity. But the most disturbing moments aren't necessarily the fights. It's the emotional cruelty, a child losing her parents, a father giving up everything for his daughter, people being treated as property, and characters being forced to smile while suffering. That's the sadistic side of One Piece. It knows exactly how to make you laugh with a character before ripping your heart out with their backstory. Then there's the world government's control over history. One Piece has spent decades teasing the Void Century, the Ancient Kingdom, and the mysterious Will of D. Egghead pushes those mysteries forward and makes one thing painfully clear. The truth itself is dangerous. Not because the truth is evil, but because powerful people are terrified of what happens when ordinary people learn it. And this is also why the anime is so cool. The scale is massive. Luffy's powers have evolved into something completely absurd. The Five Elders bring terrifying supernatural abilities. Vegapunk's technology expands the world's lore, while the animation gives major battles some serious Sakuga treatment. The contrast is what makes One Piece special. You can have a character making a ridiculous face in one scene, and then watch that same world deliver genuinely horrifying consequences moments later. That's not a flaw, that's the formula. Hardcore One Piece fans have been especially vocal about the darkness of Egghead, with Kuma's story becoming one of the biggest emotional talking points. Fan discussions frequently point to Saturn as one of the arc's central villains because of his connection to Kuma and Bonnie's suffering. The 2025 anime also sparked discussion over censorship, particularly during Kuma's flashback, because viewers noticed changes in how some brutal moments were presented. So the fandom isn't simply saying One Piece is peak. The more interesting consensus is this. Egghead proves that One Piece can still be hilarious, ridiculous, and adventurous while dealing with genuinely horrific themes. One Piece in 2025 isn't dark because it suddenly became a gore anime. It's dark because it understands something much worse than violence. What people are willing to do when they believe they have absolute power. That's why Kuma's story hurts. That's why the world government feels terrifying. And that's why One Piece remains so effective after all these years. It can make you laugh at a cartoon pirate one minute, then remind you that his world is built on oppression, sacrifice, and buried history the next. So maybe the real hidden fact about One Piece is this. The pirates aren't always the monsters. Sometimes, the scariest monsters are the people sitting at the top of the world.